You ever revisited a video game you played years ago, trying to relive the nostalgia and immerse yourself again? We've all been there. You start a new file, skip some cutscenes and the tutorial, and throw yourself back into the game. The music plays and it revitalizes you, reminding you that you're about to experience peak once more. You're having the time of your life, either mashing buttons, theory crafting your new party for this run, or just re-experiencing the game for the first time again. But as the hours go by, you feel an eerie presence slowly start to creep up on you. Then you realize you're approaching that part of the game. Yes, that part. This part could potentially be multiple things depending on the game, but they all result in one key reaction whenever you come across it. All of the joy and nostalgia you had originally when you booted up the game has been stomped into the ground and lit on fire. Wait, no, wrong person. You. That one puzzle that takes you 20 minutes to complete, the unskippable cutscene where a character does something really stupid or just makes you super uncomfortable, or sometimes being forced to use a specific character with a terrible moveset. Cough, cough, SA2, cough. And it's that last part that I want to touch on here when it comes to ZZZ. I've been playing a character that makes me think like this a lot recently, and I felt the need to talk about this. Welcome back to another episode of this series where I talk about ZZZ characters and whether they're peak cinema or the worst thing imaginable. I'll eventually have to come up with a name for this if this does end up becoming a series, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Leave a comment below suggesting something if you could come up with a creative title. But as always, before we get into things, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing afterwards. Now let's get right into it. Alright, I'm a D1 gooner for real, but I'm also one of those gays that never knows how to properly compliment women. No, not like that, you weirdo. I mean that I'm usually over the top and extremely excessive with my hyperboles and adjectives when complimenting women, i.e. the excessive use of words and phrases like serving, she ate that, gag, and the very common and overused mother. If you know, you know, and if you don't, then your sense of humor is probably very skewed. You need to get on this stand Twitter culture immediately. This shit is hilarious. Moving things back to ZZZ, Jane Doe was essentially my first mother agent for me. She was since then replaced by Tsukishiro, but this character still holds a massive place in my heart, as she was my first ever limited character and still is among one of my favorite units in ZZZ to this day. There's a video by this guy named Weebbear that goes very in depth on how Jane's design is virtually flawless, so a lot of my opinions about her can be mirrored from this video here. You should definitely give it a watch. While Jane's design is downright perfect for me, I have one particular nitpick about this character that drives me nuts every time I play this woman. Now you may be asking yourself, what could I possibly dislike about this agent's moveset that would prompt me to make a whole 16-minute long video about it? It's Salchow Jump. It's Salchow Jump, and I absolutely hate how this move works. Jeez, take a shot every time I use an adverb, yeah? Remember that analogy I made at the beginning? That's how I feel about this move every time I get it. I'm just not a fan of Salchow Jump, but before I lay into it, let's go over what this move exactly is first though. When Jane enters Passion State, she gains the ability to do one Salchow Jump. You get an additional stack if you have M1, but I only have M0, so I will be referring to her as M0. Now, the move itself is very simple. You hold down the basic attack button and Jane begins spinning and hitting the enemy multiple times, dealing physical anomaly buildup as usual. After holding for a while or releasing early, Jane will do a finishing move. She gets increased anti-interrupt and 40% DR while doing this move, and iframes on the finisher. This move is actually a reference to an ice skating trick of the same name and requires a lot of precision to pull off, especially in the exaggerated way that Jane does so. Now, in theory, this move should be perfectly fine, right? It's another form of buildup on an already insane kit here, but the issue I have with it is that it literally does not work half of the time. However, there's two layers to my grievances with Salchow Jump. There's the mechanical issues I have with it, and then there's the situational issues I have with it. But let's talk about the move mechanically first. This move is by far the most inconsistent move within Zenless Zone Zero. If you want to prove me wrong, then definitely tell me in the comments, but I definitely think so. Obviously, you're always going to hit this move against the bigger enemies, But I'm mainly talking about the lessers here. The range at which you can hit multiple enemies sucks, and sometimes they don't even get hit by every part of the move due to how far you can be from them. Let me stress that this is not really the player's fault either, because each hit of the move does interrupt to the enemy, and sometimes they just get knocked back far enough to where they fall out of the move. It also has terrible anomaly buildup too, but thankfully you only really use this move to close out and cash in on assaults rather than build them up. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The move does do its job. When it decides that it wants to, question mark? It definitely works when it's a single target move, but I've had many times where I've used this move and one of the little gooners just so happens to get knocked out of the combo, costing me either an extra 2 seconds or forcing me to waste an EX skill. Also, this move has an issue of knocking enemies back too far to where the finisher won't even connect as well. Not to mention, this move has no targeting properties outside of the beginning of the startup. When you start doing Salchow jump, it inches Jane towards the nearest enemy and stays there, which makes sense, right? Since it's a stationary multi-hit move. But sometimes you'll kill an enemy early and you'll just be left spinning there while another lesser enemy is mere centimeters away from you. And because the targeting only happens on the build-up, you're stuck doing this move for an extra few frames. You can't target the next enemy, and sometimes you'll get into this weird scenario where you're blocked by the invisible hurt box of the enemy that was just killed. This is a major problem because sometimes when you're trying to do the finishing move, it won't hit due to this invisible hitbox preventing you from moving forward. And I can already see you guys typing in the comments, "Oh, but Hollow Zero changes this move and makes it so much better." Shut your All Lost Void does is make Salchow jump move faster, last longer, and does this cooler looking finisher with this whack ass overhead at the end. Now, let me dial it back a bit. The move does do increased anomaly buildup in Lost Void, which is a vast improvement, but I definitely think that this should have been a base kit feature rather than being tied to Lost Void. Not to mention, with the way how Shiyu and Deadly Assault bosses have been, Jane hasn't had a singular patch work in her favor since her release. So if anything, giving her Lost Void Salchow jump would be more than compensatory for her. Also, big side tangent here, I have another general problem with anomalies that I do want to rant about for a bit here. I don't exactly know the science or coding behind it, so feel free to correct me and let me know if this works if you do know, but typically, anomalies will only be inflicted after the final hit of a move, excluding Bernice and Vivian, of course. And this will only happen if the agent is still the main agent you're controlling. This is similar to how triggering aftershocks works. Get it? Trigger. The last hit of the final move must be registered before that aftershock character comes on field. For example, Evelyn needs to wait to the final hit of her string on her EX skill or just her normal skill before an aftershock triggers. Jane has this issue the most, where due to her long animations, there will be a couple of frames or sometimes even seconds where the anomaly meter will be full, but because Jane is doing either quick assist or her ult, it won't trigger assault until the move finishes. This results in you losing upwards of nearly 30% anomaly buildup if you account for every instance of this happening in a run. Now, did I just pull those numbers out of my ass? I am not necessarily liable to tell you guys anything, but hopefully you understand what I mean either from experience or just eyeballing things through gameplay. This results in mere seconds of time being lost in some situations where a disorder would have killed and made the S rate clear just in time. But I've pretty much covered up all the intricacies I have with this move mechanically. Now let's move on to the situational aspects of it. Okay, so there's a couple of places where you can use Salchow jump whenever you're fighting, but for the purpose of this example, I'm going to talk about singular bosses here. Typically, there are 2 places where it is appropriate to use Salchow jump. 1, immediately after you ult to close out on an assault, and 2, during stun phase so that you can also close out on an assault. I have issues with both of these situations. The problem with the first scenario is that usually you have either already triggered an assault or are extremely close to doing so. If it's the former, then doing this move is stupid because unless the enemy is about to get stunned, newsflash, they usually aren't, you're most likely going to have to dodge counter out of the Salchow jump. This is mainly a problem because you'll be losing out on the only way to maintain your passion state for a brief period. Keep in mind that you can use Salchow jump anywhere in or outside of passion state to either maintain or build the gauge faster, and doing every hit of the move will build up the most amount of passion. Now, if the latter of the first situation happens instead, then doing this move is fine, but you still suffer from losing your only way to maintain passion, seeing as you had just ulted and the passion gauge just refilled. I'm pretty sure that this move does a fixed set of anomaly buildup anyways, and the finishing move takes a while to do as well. Transitioning to the second scenario, let's assume that you had just ended your chain attack with Jane, but the assault hasn't triggered yet. You have about 60% buildup on the gauge, and you have Salchow Jump and EX skill available. Let's also say that your passion state is at about 30% by this point too. Most bosses in Shiyu and Deadly Assault give you around 5 seconds of stun time to do as much damage as possible, but the problem is that Salchow Jump takes about 5 seconds to do the move entirely. Yes, theoretically you could always end the move faster, but due to its slow buildup, you won't get the assault in time, and you won't maximize your passion buildup. Usually, you're better off doing an EX skill to get the assault faster, but remember, you lose passion faster with that. So given everything that I have in this example, allow me to introduce you to the Salchow Jump flowchart. Okay, Salchow Jump. First important question that you need to ask yourself: are you in the stun phase? If you said yes, then you ask yourself, is the assault about to trigger? If yes, then you use Salchow Jump here. Now, if the assault triggered in time, then congratulations. You have profited and you have gotten both the assault and possibly the disorder, if you have it available, on the enemy during the stun phase and gotten the stun multiplier damage and done big damage. So now you start over with you doing your basic attack stuff and all that good stuff. But if you didn't, then you unfortunately suck at the game and you missed the timing. You still got the assault off, but not with the big numbers boost from the stun multiplier. So you naturally start over again. Now, if you go back here, is the assault about to trigger? If it isn't, then you have to use an EX skill. And if it did trigger, then boom, you got an assault off with the stun phase, stun multiplier, all that stuff. If the assault didn't trigger, then you ask yourself, oh hey, do you still have Salchow Jump? If you do, because essentially you didn't do Salchow Jump here, you would only follow in this path, because yes, you would still have Salchow Jump. You would have to Salchow Jump here, and then trigger, and then boom, profit. If you somehow didn't trigger an assault with this, I don't know what would be happening here, but you would have had to EX skill, and then Salchow Jump, and then that would have at least triggered an assault. But if you didn't do it within the stun timer, then that means that your AP is pretty bad on the EX skill. So you would unfortunately suck there. So that's essentially what you would do in the stun phase. But in the non-stun phase, in any other phase outside of a stun phase, if the enemy isn't stunned, you ask the same question. Is the assault about to trigger? And if it is, then you Salchow Jump. And if it did trigger, then boom, you've profited. You've gotten a normal assault that just does normal chain damage. And if it doesn't, then you ask yourself, do you still have Salchow Jump? Now, if you have M0, then this answer should be no. So your next course of action is to rebuild passion by just playing the game normally. Now, if you have M1, the answer here should be yes, so that you can, because I'm pretty sure when you ult, because this is giving like the situation where it's like, oh hey, you've ulted or something, and then let's just assume that she has like meter and then full stacks of passion, full stacks of Salchow Jump, right? So M1 would have Salchow Jump, you would use it, and then you would follow the same scenario. If it triggered, profit, and if it didn't, then you suck, right? But if it isn't about to trigger, then it's the same scenario as before here. Do you have meter? Yes, EX skill, follow the same line, bada bing, bada boom. And if you don't have meter, then you unfortunately have to basic attack combo until you build up Salchow Jump. If you build up Salchow Jump in time, then you do it, and then you follow this down here. And if you didn't, then you just somehow just suck at building up passion. But basically, it essentially boils down to, oh hey, is the anomaly buildup close to it as possible or not? If it's close, then you usually have to Salchow Jump. And if it isn't, and if you have the resources, then you usually have to EX skill. I'm gonna drop the picture of the flowchart in like a Google Drive so that way you guys can see it. But this is a lot more complicated than it needs to be when it's essentially just EX skill or Salchow Jump or don't. But yeah, there you go. Hopefully after that extremely convoluted explanation of things, you should be able to understand why I don't like using this move at all, yeah? It just seems like a pretty big oversight given how many mental notes you need to have while playing her. I'm not saying that she's like Haru levels of difficult and that you need to memorize absolutely everything when playing her, but I like to play characters optimally. And in order to play her in the absolute best way possible, I need to memorize and utilize every move of her kit, and Salchow Jump is one of them. Oh, but just use Piper, she's so much simpler. But yeah, Jane's an amazing character, and I am by no means at all upset or regretting that I got this character. I'm still very happy that she's on my account, but holy yam, Salchow Jump is gonna be one of the most frustrating moves to ever use optimally in the history of gacha games. And that's it for this video. This is probably the most in-depth I've gone on a video before, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed me losing my mind over a single move within a video game. Now with that being said, I just want to give a huge thanks to my channel members, FJ, Middle Class Bear, and Rumi for supporting me. Members get access to my videos a day early and a super cool Discord role in my Discord that you should totally join, by the way. And if you want to support me directly, consider buying me a coffee as well. I currently have a goal where if I get donated $1,000, I will be forced to play Honkai Star Rail, a game that I very much have been vocal on how much I despise, for a month. Now then, I have to get started on my next project, so I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.